In March of this year, an elderly couple set off in their RV for a West Coast trip from Oregon to Arizona, when one wrong turn caused a domino effect, leaving them stranded in the remotest area, Nevada. This is the ordeal on Red Mountain. Hey folks, and welcome back to the channel. Over here, every week, we cover all things tragic, such as plane crashing, caving gone wrong, any tragic story, we'll cover it here. So if that's your kind of thing, why not consider tapping that subscribe button? But in this week's tragic video, we're going all the way over to a sleepy city called Oregon in Illinois. Not to be confused with Oregon the state, Oregon in Illinois is tiny and densely packed, with a population of around 3,600. The town is nestled right next to the Rock River, a river that divides northern Illinois from the flat farmlands to the east and the hills to the left. But in the town of Oregon lived an elderly couple, 69-year-old Beverly Barker and 72-year-old Ronnie Barker. The pair had met at school in 1964, and within an instant they were madly in love. They went on to have 2 daughters and a son, marrying 18 years later on the 18th of November 1982. But after high school, Ronnie enlisted in the United States Air Force, where he stayed for 22 years, before returning home to enjoy his retirement with his wife in Oregon. The family was deeply religious. They attended the Claremont Church every week and believed in the power of God. By 2022, the couple had been together for 58 years and still going strong. When Beverly finally retired, they planned to spend the rest of their days doing what they both wanted to do. Due to age, Beverly was suffering from various health ailments. She was in a wheelchair and could only walk with a strider. She relied on Ronnie for most things, despite the fact he was older and also had problems walking and standing too. Because of this, Ronnie got the idea to buy an RV. As they both couldn't fly due to health conditions, it had given them a lot of freedom. They could go camping, take holidays, and even take long trips to see their kids across states. So before long, they purchased a Ford 2015 Forest River Sunseekers Class C motorhome, pictured here. In March of 2022, the pair planned to take their RV on a reasonably long trip. They wanted to visit their kids in Albany, Oregon, before setting off for a West Coast drive to see their friends in Arizona. Now, these kind of trips were something that the couple had done before, so on March the 23rd, Beverly and Ron finished packing the RV with food, water, and supplies, and set the sat-nav to Albany, around a 31 hours drive from their home in Illinois. But just before leaving, Ronnie decided to hitch their Kia Jeep and tow it along, just in case the RV broke down. After a long drive in the RV, with the Kia in tow, they stopped to sleep. And the next day, they made it to Albany without any problems. It was refreshing for them to visit on their own accord. They had a good catch up with their kids, and before they knew it, they were on the road again. With Ronnie in the driver's seat and Beverly in shotgun, they left on the L5 highway, a route that had planned stops in Fallon, Nevada, not to mention the Nellis Air Force Base outside Las Vegas, followed by their arrival in Arizona. Around 9:30 a.m. on March the 26th, they set off on their 1,300-mile journey to Arizona. It would take them around 22 hours. At first, the trip was going really well. They made it past Reno and on to the US 95. They couldn't help but appreciate the moment. With the windows down, they cruised along the highway, fresh air rushed through their hair. They were so glad they bought the RV, and they felt they were finally starting to enjoy retirement together. Sadly, they had no idea that it would soon lead them into a complete nightmare. They drove around all day and stopped for the night at an RV park in California. The next day, they woke up bright and early, ready to continue their trip. They phoned their friends to let them know they'd be there early the following day. As they drove west through Nevada, still traveling on the US 95 highway, their sat-nav suddenly chimed out, directing them to make the next left turn. As they got to the exit, they took a good look, and they both agreed they didn't really want to leave the highway. The off-road turn looked like poor quality, but they thought the sat-nav might be directing them away from a crash or a road obstruction, and as it had not let them down before, they blindly followed and made the turning. As they began down this dusty turnoff, things started to seem off. The well-built highway that they were just on quickly turned into rocky off-road. then to complete dirt tracks. They continued on, and the road got tighter and tighter and tighter. Large boulders and rocks began littering the road, and traversing became extremely difficult. The pair considered turning around, but the road was now so steep and so tight they were forced to continue, and hoped that the road would soon open up and make a turnaround possible. But after driving for 2 hours down this hopeless avenue, the road in front of them just entirely disappeared. They now carefully inched forward through the jagged rocks and gravel, just hoping to find a place to turn around. The more giant rocks made ear-wrenching noises as they scratched the underside of the RV. When nothing improved, Beverly got out her mobile phone to call for help, to find that there was no signal whatsoever. She tried to text her daughters for help, but it didn't go through. A pit of worry began to build in their stomachs. Looking in all directions, it was now a complete wilderness. They had no idea where they were. They tried to check a physical map that they had in their RV, but both of them struggled to read it. Unbeknownst to the pair, they were headed in the entirely wrong direction. They were going up Red Mountain. If you're not aware, Red Mountain is one of the most remotest areas of the Nevada. Located near Silver Peak in Esmeralda County, its nearest town has just 750 people. Its lunar landscape is brutal and not for the faint of heart. There's nothing out there but wilderness for miles and miles. Just scattered trees, snakes and spiders. It's a true no man's land. Unfortunately, the road they turned off had taken them straight over Red Mountain. They were now on the far side of the county. That night, the family became concerned as Beverly and Ron were not answering their calls or texts. They hoped that they just had no signal and hoped for a message in the morning. As darkness settled, the realization of their situation truly began to set in. Only their headlights now illuminated the way forward. They were now weaving and dodging between trees and boulders in the dark. Their wheels span as they towed their Kia on loose gravel. The route they'd taken, even a 4x4 all-terrain vehicle made specially for this kind of thing would struggle. But amazingly, they continued on. And as they did, suddenly the rain began trickling from the sky. At first, it pitter-pattered on the windows, and this is where things went from bad to worse. The drips of rain quickly turned into a downpour, which then turned the dry, loose mud into sticky, terrible goop, making traversing that much more awful. After what felt like hours of ignoring the scratch marks of the rocks underneath, with the rain still pounding down from above, they finally found a place in which Ronnie believed that they could turn around. They knew it was a risk, but they couldn't just keep continuing on. Ronnie pulled the RV forward and swung backwards. Amazingly, it seemed to be working, but as Ronnie put on the accelerator to go back in the direction they came, the RV wouldn't move. He slammed it down, but no, the wheels were spinning on themselves. They were stuck. Ronnie got out to inspect and discovered that they had a fully flat tyre. But worst of all, they'd essentially beached themselves. The bottom of the RV was caught by a large boulder. He pushed it to see if it would free itself, but it was futile. They weren't going anywhere. Ronnie jumped back into the RV to think about what to do next. They checked their phones and they still had no signal. So in their minds, they had two options. Either stay in the RV through the wind and the rain and try to get help in the morning, or untie the Kia that was following behind and drive to get a phone signal and call for help. Believing that they must be close to a phone signal, they eventually settled on the latter and soon began unhinging the car from the RV. They hopped into the Kia and began driving back the way they came, leaving the RV still stuck. The agonizing journey seemed to drag. Every inch that they drove, they feared that they would get stuck. As they pottered along, the Kia began to struggle in the mud, but they were relentless. They continued on. Nothing was going to stop them. Until they came to a junction, one they had not seen on the way there as they were travelling in the opposite direction. The junction split off into two paths. They examined the mud on both tracks with the headlights of the Kia, but as it had rained considerably since passing, they couldn't be 100% sure which road they took. In the dark and the craziness of it all, the pair made a fatal mistake. They took the wrong road. It seemed okay at first, but it soon got tighter and tighter, and even for the Kia, it was now impossible. This was barely a road. They could see nothing in the dark. Ronnie began turning around after realising it wasn't a road, and the Kia got stuck at the worst possible moment. They had no idea how long they'd driven from the RV, so instead of trying to go back for it, they hunkered down for the night and waited for the sun to rise. When they awoke in the morning, they found that they were in what seemed like a ravine. The Kia was well and truly stuck. Their friends, who were expecting them to arrive that morning, waited, and Ronnie and Beverly were nowhere to be seen. The families immediately contacted the police. It wasn't like them to disappear whatsoever. But sadly, as per Nevada's law, the officers told them that they couldn't be reported missing until they'd been gone for 3 days. Back in no man's land, the sun beat down from above. The pair checked their supplies, and they only had a couple of candy bars and half a bottle of water. The pair searched the car for any supplies, anything, pulling up the carpets, the seats, but it was a fairly new car. They found nothing. It was bad. As they believed that they would come into a phone signal or be rescued, they failed to bring food, water, and blankets, or any other supplies for that matter, from the RV. Ronnie climbed as high as he could to see if he could spot the RV, but he couldn't. As they travelled in the dark, nothing was recognisable. They had no idea where they'd left it. Panic began to set in. They returned to their car to shelter from the elements. Every 10 minutes, Ronnie hopped in the driver's seat and tapped out SOS on the horn, hoping that they would be heard. They repeated this over and over and over, and this went on for days. An absolutely hopeless situation. 3 days later, they were still stranded in their Kia. They had now been 2 days without food or water, and they both just huddled in the back seats of their car, hoping that they would be found. By now, 3 days had passed, so they were officially labelled as missing persons, and finally a search team began looking for them. They checked the CCTV on their routes for any sign of their RV, and they eventually found at 3:48 PM the pair had been spotted at Stagecoach Market in Nevada. They then checked the mobile phone towers and found at 5:30 PM their phones had pinged at Walker Lake, Nevada. The police continued combing through the CCTV, and the last image they found was their RV, spotted at 6:05 PM by the surveillance cameras in Luning. But on the preceding cameras, they were nowhere to be seen. This is all the investigators had to go on, until they discovered the last and most worrying piece of evidence. It was another phone ping at 7:16 PM that night, but this time it was near Silver Peak in the vicinity of Dyer, a massive 170 miles further south than they were planning on staying. Days passed in the Kia, and things weren't looking good. Temperatures dropped to 27 degrees, but thirst was the biggest concern. By day 6, the effects of dehydration began to set in. Ronnie was the one suffering the most. He could no longer walk and was delirious. On April the 3rd, after 8 days of being trapped in the Kia, mindlessly honking the SOS signal, police teams searched far and wide, even going on record as saying they searched everywhere. There was nowhere left that they could be. As far as everyone was concerned, they had vanished into thin air. On the night of the 3rd, Ronnie desperately needed water and food. He said it was draining the life out of him. Out of desperation, Beverly, despite not being able to walk properly, took her strider and began walking up to the highest point that she could, in the hope that she would find some snow. After a seriously tough trek of slowly pushing her walker up the rocky environment, she came across some snow. There, she used a COVID mask in her pocket and filtered it into a water bottle, and rushed down to share it with Ronnie. When she did, he gulped it up, but it didn't seem to make much difference. He drifted back into unconsciousness. They both huddled together that night, and in the morning, Beverly read the Bible to Ronnie. But his condition did not improve. He told her that he loved her, and that he was totally at peace with leaving our world and going to heaven. And just after 3 PM on April the 4th, Ronnie passed away in Beverly's arms. I can't even imagine what she must have been going through. I would have screamed in frustration. One simple wrong turn led them to their doom. In a last-ditch effort, Beverly got in the driver's seat and continued monotonously pushing out the SOS signal. But nobody came. The sun settled that night, and Beverly huddled next to Ronnie's body. There's not much detail in what happened after Ronnie's death, but Beverly was in the car for 10 whole days. She was sitting there, still signalling the SOS with the horn, when suddenly she heard a knock on the window. She looked over, and in disbelief, it was a team of rescuers. She was saved. The first and only thing she said was water. It turns out that rescuers had heard the SOS signal in the far distance and followed it. They first came across the RV that was stuck in the mud, but it was only 2 miles north, full of supplies. They would have attempted to walk if they'd known it was this close. By now, Ronnie had been dead in the backseat for 26 hours. Beverly had been through hell. She was airlifted to hospital where her family met her. As she was lifted up in the air, a haunting text came through to her children's phone, just reading, "Help," a message that they must have attempted to send 10 days previously. Beverly had made it out alive. However, it was bittersweet. Her lifelong partner, the love of her life, was dead. Beverly went on to make a full recovery and is living a peaceful life. They later found out that the GPS they had been following was set to avoid highways, which is why it brought them into the Nevada wilderness. A spokesperson for the family later accused local law enforcement of dragging their feet in the first days of the couple's disappearance. If a search had been started in a more timely manner, rather than 3 days later, then maybe Ronnie would still be here. Now this story is just brutally tragic. To take one wrong turn and for it to go this wrong, it's just insane. But what can we learn from this tragedy? Now this is clearly the downside of relying on technology. Always carry a reliable paper map that you can read, and do not take shortcuts through the mountains in an RV. Other than that, this was just a series of poor decisions and mistakes and misfortunes that ultimately led to a man losing his life. And my condolences go out to the Barker family and friends. But that is the end of the video. Do let me know what you thought in the comments below. But I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.